another one? That's good. Ashreyo ish, asher lo halach b'asas v'shoyim, u'v'derech chatoyim lo yamod, u'v'moshev leitzim lo yoshav. Ki im b'soiras adonai cheftzoi, u'v'soirosoi yehege yaimam v'loylo. V'hoya ke'eit shasu apal ge'moyim asher priyo yitain b'itoi, v'oleu lo yiboil. V'chol asher yaseh Yatzliach, Lekain Harishoim Ki Im Kamois Asher Tidfenu Ruach, Alkain Leyokumu Rishoim Bamishbot, V'chatoim Badas Tzadikim, Ki Yodei Adonai Derech Tzadikim, V'derech Rishoim Toveid. Tezayim. V'chtam LeDavid Shomreini El Ki Chasisi Vach, Amarto LaDonai Alihim Ato Tevosi Balilecho. L'kdosh mashevarz heme badire kochef sivam yirbo atzvoisam achem moru bal asich niskeyem midam uval ese eshmoisam al sefosoi adinoi menos cholki v'koisi ato taimich gairoli chavolim nofuli baniimim afna chalos shofro oloi avorech es adinoi asher yotzoni af leilois yisruni kilyoisoi Shivisi Adonai lenegdi samid kimimini bal emoid lochein samach libi vayogel kivoidi af pisari yishgoin lovetach ki lois azav nafshi lishoil loisiten chasid chol liroi shochas toidienich oyech chayim soivas semochois esponecha niimais mimincha netzach.
Being that today is Hanukkah, as the halacha says, we will not be having espedim, and Mrs. Lipins was somebody that would not look for loopholes, always wanted to follow directly the halacha straight, and based on that, we're not going to have espedim. Some want to say a few words, but it's not b'teres espedim, Rav Magreb.
Hesped is Aser, but Akaris HaTayv is a Chiyuv. In the name of Shem Shabbos, I want to express Hakaris HaTayv for all the years that Mrs. Lipins and her husband Yibadul L'chaim Tovim kept Shem Shabbos going with the Briach HaTichon, with the main pillar, the mainstay of the shul, and made the shul what it is. And for that, we are very makir tov, and even though we're not allowed to be maspid, but to express hakaras tov is an obligation. And the shul is very much makir tov to Mrs. Lipins for all that she did for the good of the shul. Tehei Zichra Baruch.
It is taka very difficult not to be able to be maspid. Someone who lived 75 years, was a devoted wife for 55 years, especially what she did the last 9 years for her husband, my Shver David Huda ben Sorlea, who should be gesund. She was the best mother to 4 children, son-in-laws, daughter-in-law, and 26 grandchildren, great-grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Kemispar Yudke Vovke, Ken Yirbu. She was the most devoted sister to Malki, and Baruch Hashem, 2 of her children made it to show Kavod Ach. And I spoke to Tante Malki this morning, and she was very distraught that she couldn't be here. She was the best friend of so many, and all you consider her a best friend. But it's very difficult. But I want to offer 3 approaches and why it's appropriate that we're not being maspid her today. Obviously, it's Hanukkah and that's the halacha, But as Rabbi Charlap pointed out when he came to the house this morning, he said everything that she did was according to halacha. Whatever she didn't know, she asked, and whatever the Rabbanim said, she did it to the T. There wasn't any kuntzim, there wasn't any, maybe do it this way, do it that way, I'll get a second opinion, whether it was Rabbi Grumer, Rabbi Margaretin and Shomer Shabbos, or Rabbi Garfinkel, or Rabbi Charlap, and Rabbi Bernstein in Beechwood University. It was always al pi das Torah. And if she knew that the halacha is we are not maspid today, there's no kuntzim. I don't know if she would approve of what I'm doing, but there at least would be no kuntzim. There wouldn't be any way around it. Number two, I spoke to somebody today from Lakewood who knows my in-laws for 25, 30 years, very close with them. And he said, that's exactly your shviger. She's probably smiling right now, knowing that she's not going to get a hesped. She did so much for everybody, but she didn't want any recognition. There's a third shot that I think is appropriate that I saw in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara declares a Shaila and Menvavim Beis, if a hesped that you give for a nifter, what's the purpose of the hesped? Is it for the honor of the person that was nifter, the deceased, to talk about him and to say in his praise for his honor, or is it in the honor of the living, the relatives, the friends, the relatives, and everyone there, everyone present, to see what type of, I was close to that person, I was related to him, I was friends with him. So the Gemara goes through a whole trying to find different rights, goes back and forth, and finally the Gemara says, the last proof the Gemara brings is that Reb Nosson Omer, that it's a siman tov for a mace if something happens, something doesn't go according to plan, or something, a misfortune happens. And the Gemara gives a few examples. And one of the examples the Gemara gives is if you're not maspid that person. So it's a siman tov, and Rashi explains that not being maspid a person is a kapara for the person because they didn't get the honor that they deserved. And that's how the Gemara ends off, that a hesped is for the honor of the deceased. I want to give a special thanks, although she's not here, to our daughter-in-law, Gita, the wife of Chaim Zev. Chaim Zev is our Bechor, and he was the first Lipins grandchild, and the only one with the name Chaim Zev, which was my shviger's father, Chaim Zev Hechtenthal. Him and his wife, Miriam, they were survivors of the war, and my shviger was born in a DP camp in 1946 in Germany, and Baruch Hashem, they came to America where I to build such a beautiful mishpacha. So my son's wife took it upon herself from the day my mother-in-law was diagnosed to put together a Tehillim group, a group of mostly relatives that said that completed the whole Sefer Tehillim every single day. And she didn't miss one day. Every single day there was a message. I looked back when it started. It was in October of last year. And every single day, without fail, she sent a message and reminded people. And if there was people that couldn't do it, she got someone else to replace them. And it's a huge tzchus. Just to quote her father, by the Pidna Ben of the first great-grandchild 2 years ago, her father, Shmuel Zaks, he said that it was Kedai, the whole shidduch, just to be related to Mrs. Lipins. Besides that, your children, you should have hatzlacha with your beautiful children. I also want to thank our son Shmuel for all the times he comes running in and helping Bubby and Zadie, and taking shifts in the hospital and driving people and everything you do. It's unbelievable. Everybody that sees you, they're in wonderment. How could one person accomplish so much? Your shaykhis to your Bubby, and all that you learn from her should be a schus for you and your mishpacha. I just want to end off. You know, it's funny. Everyone says it's not funny. Ends off by a hesped that the person should be a melis yosher or melitza yosher, whatever, however you say it for a woman. And I'm thinking about, do I say that to my shviger? I said I don't have to remind her. She's already there. She's ready. First thing she did when she went up to Shemayim was go to the Rebbeinu Shalom to ask him to help for all the children and grandchildren, because she knows exactly what everybody needs and what everybody wants, and that's the way she feared her whole life. Every single child and grandchild has a special shaykhis because of that. And they all learn so much from her and they emulate her. I just want to end off with the tefillah that we say in the Ilah and in Tzlichus, so many people cried, so many thousands of tears on your behalf. They should have a refuah shalema. And as David HaMelech says, they're also recited thousands of times. Sima dimasi b'nedecha, and somewhere else, El dimasi al techrash. Please don't be silent to our tears. All the tefillahs that were said, all the learning, all the kabbalahs. We have friends that told us they did different things like having our mind by being mafresh chal every week. People tried. They did their own groups, their own things they took upon themselves. Take all these chusim, v'tzatzi leinu mikav kol gzeres koshes v'achzor yos. V'pila mos l'nesach mocha Hashem dim melech al panim v'nei amen.
Usually, the patir of a person is one thing, and the hesped is separate. In this case, the Rebbeinu Shalom wrote the hesped in the patir. The hesped is that our heart and our whole mahus is exploding with regoshim. We get demois, we get atzvus, all types of emotions, sad emotions. But we got to hold it in. Because today is Hanukkah. Today's the Yontif. That's the hesped on Dina. The Rebbeinu Shalom said it should be like this. We don't cut corners. We don't do it other ways. We don't try to find other plans. We don't try to find other ways how to do it. We don't go looking for heterim. No matter what we feel, no matter what's in our hearts, we do what the halacha says. We do it the right way. That is the hesped. The Rebbeinu Shalom, in the Ma'aseh Ptira, wrote the hesped. We do it right. The story nobody knows. It happened about 2-3 months ago. It's also because what she embodied what she had in her neshama. I called her before Rosh Hashanah. It's time to see how she's doing. Like I always called, how you doing? What's going on? Okay, during the course of our conversation, she said, you know, before Rosh Hashanah, I always give money to the kollel, don't I? I said, I don't know. I didn't call for that. I just called to see how you're doing. That's all. So she says, I'm giving. Okay. And she gives me an amount. Fine. I called the secretary, asked, is this? She says, no, that's not the regular amount. She used to give a lot less. So I called her back. And I told her, Dina, I think you made a mistake. When you want to give, that's your business. But I think you're just a lot more than usual. She says, no, keep it for the kollel for sure. A couple days later, she calls me back. She tells me, you know what happened? She was in some type of parking lot, I don't know where, and her glasses fell off, and then the door opened up from the car, and she fell out. I didn't get the exact details. And the car started rolling backwards. And Baruch Hashem, nothing happened. You know why? We know that pasuk, but that's not the emphasis here. The emphasis is that everything that happened in her life, right away, a pasuk, a chazal, something that she learned. Her whole life, she was a Beis Yaakov girl. That's what she was. That she was taught by her parents. And that's the way she lived her life. Everything according to Mamor Chazal, Mamor Shlomo HaMelech, but everything was based on Torah. There were no changes. Her whole life, a Beis Yaakov girl. Let me just add on one point. There are a lot of people that start their life off as Beis Yaakov girls. And they end off their life also Beis Yaakov girls. But in the middle, somehow, they went through a roller coaster. Some way, somehow, a little bit tahin, a little bit tahir. By her, from beginning to end, Beis Yaakov. She lived her whole life that way. Whatever situation, that's what always came out. What her parents taught her, her education, she went to Beis Yaakov in New York, a ganzem Leben, that's the way she lived. It's very hard. I think it's hard to talk today. It's very hard. Like David should have a full shlema. Always says, your father was my father, your mother was my mother, you're my brother, and she was the same way. She's my sister. She was the aunt of all my kids. We were one house. Who came to us for Pesach in the early years when I... And then who always took care of us in certain situations. Took care of my kids. David took care of me. My father took care of David. After the umgluk he went through. It was one family. We were mamish mishpacha. Let's just look at one more nakuda. When Hagar and Yishmael were banned from Avram Avinu's home, they went out to Midbar. Yishmael got sick. No water, fever. And what did Hagar say? She pushed him into the bushes. I'm going far away. I can't see this. Well, Arab and I just can't see this. That's how the Umas HaOlam do things when something difficult appears. What happened with Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu, at 3 months old, he was already too big, he was crying. His parents couldn't control him. It was impossible. It was a sakana. So what did Amram and Yocheved do? They put him in a box and they put it on the river. But what did Miriam do? She stood from far to see what would happen. Goyim abandoned. Amram and Yocheved, for whatever cheshbon, they did what they had to do, but they didn't look for the future, for whatever reason. Akopana Miriam, she stood from the side. She was always looking, what am I going to do in case something happens? She was worried, she was concerned. And she stood there and watched to take care of anything that might happen. Any issue would arise, she was there. Dina was Miriam. She was always there for David, for the children, for the Einekach. Always concerned and always waiting to see what happened, what might occur right now, what can happen. If something is going to happen, I'm going to take care of it. She never swerved from what you're supposed to do. Her ganzen Leben, her bis Yaakov Mädel, her whole life. And she always took care of everybody else. And she always daiged. And everything al pi halacha. She should be a good to better for her beautiful children and Einekach, who all strive for more, want to get closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Go to the Kisei HaKavod, ask for her for Shleima, for David, and ask for protection for all the children and the grandchildren. Be a good to better for Klal Yisrael. We know you're going to knock on Hashem's door and you're going to tell him, send Mashiach. Times are tough. Should be Zeicha. Tavila Mavas L'Netzach L'Mocha Hashem Elikim Dima Me'al Kol Panim.
As it was repeated before, we don't make a speidim on Chanukah, but a limud of somebody's maisim is something you could talk about. One of the only times in Tanakh that we find the description of a person as an Adam Gadol, which is the reason why I can talk about my mother-in-law. He's a great person. He's in Malachim Beis Perik Dalet Pasuk Ches. It says in regard to the Isha Ashrunamis, it says as follows: Vayihi Hayoim Vayaver Elisha El Shainim V'Sham Isha Gedola. I saw as the Malbim brings down B'Shem the Zoya, he says this lashon. He says Shahoyse b'Maisim Tovim Ubachashivas. What's he teaching us? That what makes an Isha an Isha Gedola, what gives it a title of an Isha Gedola, is HaMaisim Tovim and HaChesed. I was saying to myself, there's no better person that fits that description than my mother-in-law. The first time, if you ever met her, the regal smile across her face, everybody was treated like someone chashiv and somebody, the warm feelings, and to the community and to the world at large and to everybody, and especially to her family. She would do anything for her children or her grandchildren. There's nothing that got in the way to do something for her children and her grandchildren. So it was also brought down B'Shem of Chaim Vital, the Talmud from the Arizal, that one of the first things the person's, when they talk about chesed and shemayim, is they talk about the chesed that one does with one's family. Where there's no glory. how someone treats their spouse and their children. This is what is considered. This is what's considered a Baal Chesed, and this is what she always strived for. This is what my mother-in-law was all about. I had this chus. I came a couple of weeks ago. I wasn't supposed to come, and I came and on a Thursday night, and I came in on a Friday morning, and I came in and how her eyes lit up, how she was so happy to see us, and she was actually the last waking days of her life. And all she talked about was the children and the grandchildren, nothing about herself, nothing about anything about anybody else. Everything was about, how's Adi, how are you doing? Oh, you came. How it went through every grandchild, everybody's, where they're holding, what they're doing. A limit from someone like this, she's talking Isha Gedola. An Isha Gedola like that is royal lisboid. In my eyes, in the eyes of the whole community, she was an Isha Gedola. Unparalleled chesed, unparalleled warmness and kindness to everybody. And that's the lesson, that's what everyone should take with. And never complained one day, or every time you called, I never, in 30 years knowing, I never heard her complain once about anybody or talk one word bad about anybody ever. There's always, oh, next thing, let's talk about the next, never talked about anything. So that should be a male yosef for her children, her grandchildren, and her husband suffered 8 years of taking care of him, worked so hard. Always said, we take one day at a time. That was a line to me all the time. One day at a time, Shalom, one day at a time. And I thank all the people in the community who helped, Uvinami Desla, and Mrs. Landau, Mrs. Shapiro, and everybody, and Rabbi Mrs. Sheinbaum, everyone, go on and on and on and on. People who brought things, and I was here 2 weeks in the house, and the chesed, it's something the community could be proud of. And she was a pillar of that, and she was so devoted to that in her life. And there should be a Meretz Yosha, and should be for the family and for everybody. And it should be L'Bila Nes Amolos Nesach Mochel Shem L'Kim Dim Al Kopanim.
The Kfura is going to be in the Mount Olive Cemetery, the Shomer Shabbos section, and Shiva is going to be at 23891 Wendover Drive, the Lipins residence, and everybody will be sitting there together the whole time, correct? Are there hours? No. 24/7?